Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Educated Calm Snap channel. How you doing? So today I want to talk about Living Tribunal. It came out very recently, basically over the night, and I wanted to give you guys my first impressions of the card, some ideas of what to do with it, how I think you can utilize this card, and just generally my recommendations for this card, and blah 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 for the future. Let's get started. So first off, let's take a look at the actual card. So it's a 6 energy, 6 power card with the ability ongoing. You split your total power evenly among locations. So what this allows you to do is allows you to have one location that's very high priority, lots of power, and move that across the rest of the field here. So you can definitely do some interesting shenanigans with this where the opponent thinks you're going to win this particular location or you've overinvested in a particular location. Well, then you can hit them with Living Tribunal and get that moving across the field. So the main benefit of this is that it's unexpected, and I think it will continue to be unexpected. And you can definitely get some large cube wins with this card, right? So I don't think people are going to be like, oh my god, Tribunal's coming down. I really don't see that being the future of Marvel Snap. So anytime you can get a good setup, which we will talk about, this can be a pretty powerful card. Now, let's talk about whether I recommend this card or not. So I'm going to say my overall impressions for first impressions, if I would recommend you spending 6,000 tokens or not, is going to be a hard no. I'm not going to recommend this card. I think it has some problems, some issues that need to be addressed before you could really start seeing this in a more consistent fashion. So there are some issues, but like one of my main issues, I guess, would be the consistency of this card and its reliance on things that are out of your control. So just because you have this card in your hand doesn't mean you have a good game. It doesn't mean you have your combos. You need so many other pieces to really make this card work. It's not very reliant on itself to carry your games. You need other things to do. And then alternatively, when it does work, it's not always going to work in the manner you want, right? So even if you are winning, its power levels don't really dictate that it can make you continue to win. You have to be already dominating, right? But when you look at this card, you break it down, what its contribution to the actual power of the game is 2 points into every location. It's a Mr. Fantastic. Let's or Miss, yeah, I believe, Mr. Incredible and Mr. Fantastic. I know I mess up that one in particular, but that's what it is, right? It's 2 power across all locations if you break it down by itself. And for 6 power, 6 energy, right? That's not carrying you, but it's not giving you a lot of pressure. It's not giving you a lot of tempo or anything. So there has to be more done, some pre-work for this to really be a really dominating problematic card, right? When you compare it to like Doctor Doom, which is an amazing card, of course, and things like that, it's really not standing by itself. It has to rely on the work of others to really do well, and that's essentially what makes it hard for it to be a consistent card, because when you draw this, you're like, well, I need everything else. You don't feel any better. But that's my overall impressions, at least for a first impression. It's just not good enough. It doesn't really do it. It doesn't do anything to stand out or to make you win a game. You kind of require all your other pieces to do the work for you, and then you also need this on top of it to be like that game changer, that something that breaks the expectations of your opponent, why they would actually lose the game. So let's get talking into some of the actual cards that can synergize with this card at least decently well. Now, as I looked here, I realized I couldn't really find that many synergistic cards. So that's usually I have like 2 to 3 pages of cards to talk about, but I couldn't even fill a page of like cards. Hey, this would work here. So that's a little problematic as well in terms of like I don't see that much synergy with this from a card angle perspective, which is usually not that good. But let's go through the cards I did think were meaningful, right? So Electro, I think is pretty nice because it lets you at least get um, the Living Tribunal early, and since Living Tribunal costs 6, it's going to be hard to get lots of big cards dropping. So you kind of need a card like Electro to give you that ramp, so you can at least play some other big cards. Because if your only big card is Living Tribunal, that's really not going to do a lot for you. Dracula is something I think comboed with Infinite, which I also put in here, is just a big 2-card combo that can actually be pretty powerful. So Dracula's a card where when people play it down and they know that you're running like an Infinite combo, they kind of don't contest that lane, right? Because you're like, that's 14, 8, 20 power there. It's really hard to win that lane. So you can actually get by like not really investing much into it because you're expecting your opponent not going to invest much in it. And that power you're going to put in that lane, you can really move it to other lanes with the Living Tribunal. So that's something you can do. It also means that you don't have to invest like the big card on turn 6 into the Infinite. You can invest the Living Tribunal and not have to worry about, I won't have a lot of power there. So that's something you can do. Wong, I think, is also a very common combo. I guess you could put Mystique in here, but Wong is known for making lots of high power situations, at least in its singular lane. Things like Black Panther, things like what's it called, Ironheart, any on reveal shenanigans with Odin, right, can really just get out of control if you have a really powerful Wong setup. Usually it's like Wong and Mystique and something else, but the potential is there for there to be like some crazy high stats in a Wong lane, and then you Living Tribunal and move it to another lane. So that is something you can do that is particularly viable if you want to go that approach. Obviously, Wong has its own issues. And I will say right now, people aren't really playing to counter Wong, but if it becomes meta, which I doubt, but if it does become like very problematic, you might see some people teching in causes and stuff again to really deal with that scenario. But for now, that is something that can synergize. I think Iron Man Onslaught is pretty common. I think that's like the first thing most people think about when you think about Living Tribunal. Iron Man and Onslaught is just not a fair combo. The synergy just becomes pretty exponential, especially if you have any location synergy with that. It's just like, yeah, this isn't really a fair place to put it in. So I can definitely see that being something that Living Tribunal decks want to take a look at, where the synergy with Iron Man, the synergy with Onslaught can be a very, very big combo piece. And then Black Panther is just like it's kind of like Electro, but you can go like Black Panther into Zola, or Black Panther into Wong into Zola, or into Wong into Black Panther into Zola, etc., etc. But you can make really big stats essentially with Black Panther with some synergy, and that is something you're always looking for these Living Tribunal decks. And then Hela is just a very common thing. Hela puts out tons of stats, and you can definitely take advantage of that huge stat placement. I personally think you don't need Tribunal in a Hela deck. Like, it's like you already win if you can get the Hela to go off. You don't need to win with Tribunal. Like, that's just a fancy win. You're having fancy cheese, but the regular cheese fills you up just the same. So I don't really see it there. And then Dr. Octopus is something I haven't really seen people talk about, but I think it could work because the way Dr. Octopus usually presents itself is you play it on 5 and you put out all their threats in a singular lane. Well, now instead of dealing with that threat lane, you can say, oh, this is a lane they have a lot of their pressure in, but now I can win the other 2 lanes. And that 10 power I'm putting into that Dr. Octopus lane, I can now move some of that power, like 6+ power of it, and move it into those other 2 lanes to contest with. So I think it's something that could be pretty relevant in in a Living Tribunal deck, because you take out their pressure and you move in that lane, and then you use your power to win the other two lanes, and that could be something that they won't fully expect. So that's something I would try. I would experiment if I had a Living Tribunal. I would definitely look into seeing if that is something that makes sense consistently. So those are some of the cards I was thinking about when I was looking through the list of cards for Tribunal. But let's talk about the archetypes. I do think people will be playing Tribunal and at least experimenting, at least for now. Maybe in the future they'll have a full, this is what it works in. But let's talk about the ideas that people have been talking about. I think first one is ramp. Living Tribunal is kind of hard to utilize without some type of ramp, because either magic or whatnot, because it costs 6 and it doesn't really win you the game by itself. So you have to use other big cards, other big pressure points to take advantage of it. And I can see that happening. Lockjaw is also something that has the same metric. It's just a different engine to do it. You want to summon big cards because Living Tribunal is too expensive by itself. So Lockjaw will get you big cards, and then you can move that Lockjaw pressure into other lanes. Makes sense. Mr. Negative is another one I think also makes sense. Not because it works with Living Tribunal, but once again, you need big power, and Mr. Negative decks have a tendency to make big power. Now, the issue that it doesn't work with Living Tribunal, I think, hurts this viability quite a bit. But the idea is you go Mr. Negative, and then you have all these really cheap, big power cards, and then you flood into it with the Living Tribunal at the very end. Makes sense, but the issue of Living Tribunal not having synergy is hurts it quite a bit. And then Iron Man is more of an ongoing type archetype where you're thinking, okay, I'm going to put in Iron Man, Onslaught, Synergy, and then have Living Tribunal move that power around. Now, the issue with this one is it's hard to go Iron Man, Onslaught, and Living Tribunal without any type of ramp. So you might need some ramp scenarios, which makes it a little bit harder. But I do think ongoing is something that can work with the Living Tribunal package. It just needs a little bit of tweak, maybe like an extra card synergy that's added into the game or something. But yeah, it's definitely viable if you can set it up. And then Hela, we've talked about a little bit, but being able to just pump out a lot of cards, in a lot of lanes, and then move them and equalize the stats is definitely a pretty powerful thing to do. My case is like, do you really need Living Tribunal if you have the Hela setup? Probably don't. So that's my issue why I wouldn't really care whether you played with Hela or not. I feel like if you're already having a good Hela game plan, you don't really need to do this extra work on top of it. So those are the archetypes I think people will be experimenting with. Don't know what people are going to end up being like, this is the list, or if none of them will be, and it'll be something completely different. But those are my thoughts and like what archetypes are going to work out. I was thinking about making some deck builds, but I wasn't happy with any of them, and I don't think it makes sense for me. Like, I'm not recommending the card anyway, so it was hard for me to be like, oh yeah, this looks fancy, but I don't know if it looks like good. And then there's some extra things I did want to talk about. So even though I do think it's going to be hard, I think there are some pretty interesting locations that actually work pretty well with Living Tribunal. I personally think Living Tribunal is more of a location RNG deck than a card RNG deck. I think if you have some good locations, you can really take advantage of what this card does. But the problem is locations are not something you can play around or plan around to the consistent point that's going to make it worth playing this card. But any location that gives you a big spike of power, I think has a lot of potential here. So things like Mojo World, if you're winning Mojo World, you get that plus 100 power. That can really guarantee you the win, right? That 100 power spread across the lanes, that's 33 power. It's going to be so hard for anyone to really deal with that. So if you can win Mojo World with Living Tribunal, you've pretty much got that lane on lock. Now, Nidavella is another lane where I think you can really take advantage of it, because that extra 5 power, once again, you can move to the other locations. You play 4 cards here, that's 20 power. That's not negligible, that you can really take advantage of it. And if you're playing Iron Man or anything like that, right, like it gets to crazy numbers, and you can really just move that across to the other lanes and really take that win there. Same thing with Shuri's lab, same thing with Gamma's lab, especially if you're playing things like Iron Man. You can really take that power, move it across the other lanes, and really get a win. So that's something you can take up. And then Bar Sinister usually tends to have pretty big stats in there as well, since you get 4 times one of your big pieces, and as long as you are taking it correctly, you can have over like 30, 40, 50 power there, and then move it to the other lanes with the Tribunal. So you can kind of see where I'm coming from. Like, these locations really do help a Tribunal deck. They make it feel good. And the problem is, like, it's hard to play consistently and wait for your turn for a location like this to pop up, right? Like, that's not really how you want to play the game. You want to have ways to win even if no locations show up, right? But that's not really my feeling with this type of deck. I feel like this deck really does need a location to give it some edge. So there are some interesting locations, but it's hard to recommend a card because there's 5 locations that are good or decent for it. Like that's not the standard you want. But overall, when it comes to Living Tribunal, you are not the fanatic. I don't recommend it. I overall, I just don't recommend it. I think it's too convoluted, and its power base is too low. It's too power across the other lanes, and even though there are some scenarios and deck archetypes that can make it work, there's not a lot of consistency. Even if you have this card in your hand, it doesn't mean you're going to have a good game, right? You need a lot of pieces, and you need the pieces in the right order for it to work out, and it's just kind of hard to take advantage of it in a meaningful way. I do think if more synergy comes out, you can definitely take a revamped look at it. But for now, just looking at the data, looking at the impression, and just the feel of the card, I just wouldn't recommend it. So that's my thoughts. Feel free to talk about it in the comments or anything like that. But yeah, I wouldn't spend 6,000 tokens on this. If you guys like this, drop a follow. But I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves and have a wonderful rest of your day. Na 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 na. Once you watch him, you won't go back. He'll teach you to marvel snap. Your skills will be